The snow came down as if it had been waiting in the dark above the world for centuries, patient and implacable, as quiet as breath leaving a body. It settled on broken ramparts and dead torches, on the frozen hair of men it could not bring back to warmth, and on the glaive-sharp shadow of the godswood, where the torn banners of a dozen houses draped the branches like exhausted birds. The wind carried embers blown from fires no one tended now. They spiraled, orange ghosts among the flakes, then guttered into black smuts that clung to new white drifts. No dawn declared itself. The hour after battle made no promises. Davos Seaworth stood in the Winterfell yard with his left glove off because leather was clumsy on a wound you could not see. His hand looked whole, and yet it shook. His thumb rubbed the ridge of an old scar at the side of his palm, a habit he had when counting losses. He had counted ships most of his life, then sons, then promises, then men. The new shape of the castle. Charred timbers collapsed through roofs, doors splintered off hinges. The black shine of ice where water had been thrown and seized mid-splash refused arithmetic. He could not tally what the snow tried to smother. He could not tally despair. Ser Davos. The voice was thin with cold and shock but crisp in its own way. A boy whose chin had not yet found a beard stood at his elbow, eyes too bright in a face rimed with frost. The boy's nose bled in a slow red thread that the cold could not quite seal. Ser Davos, they're coming back up. Davos turned. The trench that had burned around the walls was a sunken ring of sodden, smoking cinders. The boy meant the dead within the castle who were not still anymore. He knew. He had seen the way bodies hinged to their feet with a creepy, efficient urgency. How many? Davos asked. The boy's eyes slid to where the gate sank askew in its posts. Too many, Ser. Enough of that, Davos said, soft but stern. Find those still breathing. We ride south by whatever gate the bastards forgot to jam. If there isn't one, we make one. The boy nodded and vanished with the stamina of someone buoyed by command. Davos took 2 steps and paused, because he saw the godswood through the mist of his breath and something led his feet that way. The heart tree had burned low where oil thrown upon it had spread like a blessing turned curse. He walked past a helmed thing that had been a man until an hour ago. It turned its empty face toward him and made a sound like thawed meat sliding. Davos did not look second time. He had learned to make his eyes move forward in battle like hands on a tiller, and it saved him more often than blade work. Through the broken door into the hall that had been a place of bread and hot wine, he found the heat of a last hearth fire dying into a dull, angry core. Here and there the living lay in heaps, a heap because they were human and needed each other's warmth, not because they were baggage. A woman with soot-smeared cheeks clutched a baby under her cloak. The baby's mouth worked at the wool, making a damp place. A drunk man who had been sober for the fight had relapsed into a stunned laugh, and Davos wanted to shake it out of him, to dredge him up to fear so he could move, but a hand on his arm stayed him. The gates to the east are half open, said Ser Brienne, hair plastered to her forehead with sweat turned to shining threads. Her eyes were bloodshot in a face that always looked honest. The tower over them is gone. We can get a column through if we skirt the fallen stones. Her mouth trembled as if it remembered something it could not fit words around. Good, Davos said. We'll take anything that resembles an exit. Have you seen the Lady of Winterfell? Brienne's hand tightened. She was in the crypts. Davos swore, old salt language that fogged in the air and then froze on his teeth. They'll have been alive down there, he said, which was not what he meant to say. He meant the dead from long ago would be moving in their tombs because that was what was true now. He had never believed in ghosts until they had hands. The doors held. For a time, Brienne replied. Tyrion was with her. He said there were tunnels. She had Jon Snow's bastard sword in her hand. No, Longclaw was not his to give. This was Oathkeeper. Red gold in the light, dull now with blood, an honest stain. We have to clear as many as we can. If we can make it to the King's Road. Davos nodded. We will. Gather whoever follows your voice. I'll take the kitchens and the stables. He looked toward the rafters where smoke braided itself, and there was a sound that turned heads as easily as thunder. The beat of truly enormous wings, and a scream that had broken men on both sides of war already. The dragon came low as a storm head, embers swirling in its wake. The yard flared orange, then plunged into a colder black the instant the drop of heat had passed. Davos's throat closed in awe or in grief. He could not differentiate those in a pinch. He saw her then, on it, the queen who was a girl and not a girl, hair unbound and face smeared with ash like a warrior of some old tale you told in a tavern to make boys boast and girls frown. Snow swarmed around her like bees confused by winter. She did not look down. She looked where the wind looked, north, to the gate and the great flat space beyond the walls where battle had been less a struggle of armies than an argument with oblivion. Davos did not call to her. She was already what she had to be. The dragon banked. Frost tried to pin fire in place. Beyond the walls something rose, enormous and wrong. The air had a new weight. "Go!" Davos said, and the word had the iron of command because there was nothing else left to hit with. People lurched to their feet. He helped the woman with the baby up, shouldered a boy whose collarbone was blue with breakage, seized a handful of men who would answer orders out of habit if not hope.
Brienne tur.
Ned, and her voice hoarse carrying, found a dozen more with the raw instinct to survive. In a corridor where the stones sweated cold, light came and went in a ragged pulse, as if the castle itself were breathing its last. Davos slipped on a smear that might have been soup or blood. The smell told him it was both. A body blocked their way. When he bent to move it, the eyes snapped open like moths. But before those hands could find his leg, Brienne's boot crushed knuckles with a sound like twigs. "Up," she told the dead thing, as if mocking it, and it did not obey the old word that used to mean life. It tried to crawl with the other hand. Oathkeeper came down with a hard economy of motion, and the head rolled into the straw along the wall, body twitching like a fish in air. They came to the east gate. The tower over it had slumped like an old man. Lean-to timbers and stones split. There was a gap that a wagon could have squeezed through if one had not been embedded just exactly where it made trouble. Davos gestured. For men with shoulders like barrels heaved at the broken axle. It grated ice. The sound drew a cluster of quick, stuttering movements from the shadows. 3 dead who moved as a single intention. Brienne pushed past Davos, because he was more valuable alive as a shepherd of the living than a soldier, and met them in a flurry of blade on bone. Behind them the dragon screamed again, and Davos looked once over his shoulder, because he was human and because if he did not take that one glance he would carry that denial into death. The dragon was harried in the sky by a lurching thing of dark ice and blue fire, a silhouette of hate that bent the air. He saw Jon Snow on foot in the yard, hair and cloak like something thrown aside by a storm, sword raised and mouth open on a name that might have been the Queen's or the name of something none of them had ever met until tonight. Davos could not hear either. Wind and the howl of a dead dragon owned the air. "Sare!" The boy from before shouted. The wagon shifted and the space was enough. Davos did not remember making the decision to leave Winterfell. The castle made it for him by no longer being a place where mortals lived. "Move," he said, and bodies poured through. More than he dared hope, less than he feared. The snow took them in a muffling embrace, erased their prints even as they made them. But they moved, heads bent, mouths scarves, babies under coats, old men with legs like saplings. Brienne was first out, then turned and stood not in the breach but a little beyond it, a dam against a flood. Davos skirted her, touched her shoulder as a blessing that asked no gods to hear it. The road away from Winterfell was lined with black spears of burned trees. Snow underfoot squeaked in the way of deep cold. Felt like stepping on bones. Davos had lost the woman with the baby and found her again twice by the sound a child makes when it is too cold to choose between crying and silence. He counted as he went without knowing he did. Named names of men he did not know in his mind, so the tally rose like breathing. He heard, once only and far behind, the profound hush that comes after something huge and heavy collides with earth, a finality that lifted the hair on his neck. He did not look back for fear of seeing the shape that sound had meant. He was not a brave man. He had done brave things when pressed. He set his jaw and held the line of the column steady. In the lee of a toppled wall, someone stood with a dagger and a look that had once been hot with life and now blazed with an icy anger that did not thaw. Sandor Clegane had a scarf wound around his throat. Bristly beard rhymed white. His eyes were raw. The girl beside him, hat pulled low and face mottled with bruising around one eye, looked like the wind could lift her. It did not. She planted her boots and watched the dark behind them as narrowly as any wolf. Clegane, Davos said, because in a night like this names were ropes at sea. The big man only grunted. His gaze flicked over the stream of people as if to count them, but the numbers were wrong and he stopped. The girl's hand was wrapped in cloth. Blood had soaked the cloth and frozen into a stiff claret flower at the knuckles. "You need a horse," the hound said. His voice was gravel scraped by use. "You'll fall on your face if you try to keep up with the foot." He flicked his eyes at the girl. "She'll ride double with me." "I can ride alone," the girl said without looking at him. She had a low, flat voice, the kind that made men twice her size yield a half step without knowing they had. Davos nodded. "If you've got the beasts, take a point ahead and cut away drift where it packs." He had a mad thought that the girl might be Arya Stark, but Davos had lived long enough not to assume that the world would line itself up neatly in his mind. He did not ask. The hound was already moving, dragging a bay gelding by its bridle. The girl swung up to its back with a stiffness that told Davos the ribs under her leathers were bruised to their colors. Clegane put a boot to his mount and the two pushed a wake through snow that caught behind them like surf, and the column settled into following. Behind them the world made new mistakes. The cry that went up was not human and had no fear in it. It vibrated in bone more than it broke air. Davos did not look back. They made the cover of a copse where the wind could not pry at them and Davos dared a pause. He set his hands to his mouth to warm them with breath and regretted it. His breath stank now, sour with last courage. Beside him Brienne leaned her shoulder to a tree as if asking it for judgment, sword still bare. Ice beaded on its blood. A young man with the stark colors ragged on his sleeve drifted toward her, eyes haunted. "Sare," he said, Have you seen Jaime?" It was strange how simple that name could be spoken, as if it were a bucket you lowered into a well and half the time you not look to see what came up with the water. Brienne flinched. "No," she said. "No." He nodded as if that answer made sense and went back to the living, which was an act of grace in itself. They did not build a fire because there was no point in drawing notice to the fragile fact that they were not dead yet. Davos turned to speak and found Tyrion Lannister sitting on the root of a tree as if he had grown there, cloak hoisted high and teeth bared to it. His hair was a black shock, his face a mess. Someone's boot had kissed it and left him with an eye that would swell closed by noon, if noon ever came again. "Ser Davos," Tyrion said, "Prince of onions and patron saint of bad odds. Am I pleased to see you? I might be pleased to see anyone whose heart still beats for reasons that have nothing to do with sorcery." "Are you whole?" Davos asked. Tyrion tilted his head, as if considering. "What's left of me is intact. The Lady Sansa is with the other survivors farther back." She comported herself as if she had never expected anything else from fate, which says something mostly unflattering about the fates of Starks. "The crypts," Davos said. "More lively than advertised," Tyrion replied, the corner of his botched mouth lifting. "We found a tunnel, or Sansa knew of one and let me believe I found it. She has learned a thing or two about the uses of pride." "Good," Davos said again, and again meant only that the universe had not yet shut its fist entirely. A shadow passed over them, colder than the wind. They all knew shapes of death now by the way they made the air go still. Faces lifted, Tyrion's, Brienne's, Davos's, and a roar answered any question. The sky tore open along a scar of blue fire that did not feel like fire at all. Far off, the Queen's dragon answered with red and gold that fought to be warmer. Between them moved a figure on the nearer thing with arms spread as if the storm itself were reins. There was no hurry in him. He was a fact. Davos shut his eyes for the span of 3 heartbeats. When he opened them, he said, "We move." They moved. By the time the gates of Winterfell ceased to be something to fear, the castle was no longer behind them as a silhouette but as a memory that would freeze differently in different minds. Davos kept the party to the King's Road because the way was least drifted there, and because roads had always been the invention most useful to men who needed to live another day. He knew the tales about how the neck would slow an army. He had never heard one that involved an army that did not need to breathe. South then, east if they had to, toward White Harbor, and ships if the sea had not frozen. He did not plan in lines in his head. He planned in circles, always remembering that the sea was patience and hunger both. Snow laid itself upon faces until every face looked like every other, which could be a mercy or a sorrow depending on who you loved. At a bend where willows leaned over the ditch, a woman's foot slipped, and she would have gone down into black if Brienne had not caught her coat by the seam and hauled her back like hauling a net. The woman had a boy strapped to her chest whose nose was blue at the tip where cold had pinched it shut. He made no sound at all. The woman's eyes met Brienne's and something passed there. Rage, gratitude, refusal. Brienne put her hand on the boy's head a moment, bare palm to scalp under the scarf as if to pour heat through will, then turned away before either of them could be forced to speak. When the wind lulled, they could hear the winter at their heels, a skittering rush, the slide of armor on ice, and sometimes the hoot of something that had learned to look like an owl and was not. They did not look back. To look back took time, and time was blood here. Once, at a rise where the land grew stony and the road cut through a low hill, Davos saw the hound and the girl in profile against a sky that was turning from snow-bellied black to a gray so pale it made you doubt your eyes. The girl's head was turned toward the north. A scarf had slipped and the bite that scarred the white of her neck caught the light. She shifted in the saddle in that way only those who had spent childhoods in courtyards learned. A balance that meant she could be standing on the back of a horse if she wanted to. Her left hand, the bandaged one, rested low and steady on the horse's withers. Davos thought again, she's a Stark or something like a Stark, and let it go because names solved nothing that needed solving at that moment. They reached the trees of a small village before the sky found any color. The houses were low and the roofs held weight like old women who had carried baskets their whole lives. A fence had fallen. A dog lay in a drift like a lump of old leather. When Davos bent and put his hand to the fur, frost stiffened and came away on his glove like very thin glass. There was no smoke from any chimney. It was quiet, which meant the dead had not noticed the place yet or had noticed it too thoroughly. Either way, they needed what the village had: shelter, food that could be torn loose from ice, a place to count. The first door Davos tried gave way with a sigh. The room inside smelled of turnips, sour ale, old wood that had been wet too often. There were 3 pallets on the floor and a shelf with 2 jars of honey where the sugar had crystallized into pale crystals, a sugar he had once sold on docks. He took one jar and left the other for the next ones through the door. It was a habit built into him deeper than hunger. He took 2 blankets and a knife that had never been worth much and a handful of dried peas. He left a coin on the shelf without thinking and realized he had done it by the sound it made tapping wood. He stared at the coin a long time. He had not left a coin to the dead since he was a younger man, and it made him shiver as no wind had. Outside, Tyrion crouched on a stoop with his back against stone. Face turned away fr. OM the day because the day refused to change, and muttered, "She'll take the sky again. She always does. She will not leave him." He did not say names either. "She will if she must," Davos said. "There's the world, and then there's the world as we want it to be. She's had enough men tell her she owes them what she doesn't." Tyrion looked up and something bitter almost softened. "You sound as though gods have spoken sense into you." "Gods don't favor men like me enough to talk," Davos said. "Then we are lucky indeed," Tyrion murmured, "and it would have been a jest another night." Sansa Stark came walking at the head of a cluster of people as if she had been born to it. She had a cloak of gray trimmed in something that had been white once, and the hood held snow like a crown she refused. Her hair was braided close to her skull. Her mouth had a fixedness that reminded Davos of mothers who had lost one child already and had no intention of being so careless a second time. She looked at Davos, then at Tyrion, and the smallest tilt of her head was a nod made out of bone and resolve. "There is a cellar under the far house," she said, "full of old cabbages and empty barrels. We can crowd the children there for an hour while we decide if this place kills us by staying or kills us by leaving." "It'll be worse in the dark," Davos said gently. "The dead don't care," Sansa answered. "But we do." She looked past him at Brienne with a gratitude that did not have to be explained. It made Brienne's jaw set harder, as if that thanks weighed more than any duty. "Water," Davos said, "and something to stop holes. Get tar if there's any. The whites." He still could not say the word without tasting ash. "They don't tire, but they do prefer where the light is thin." Sansa nodded once and was already turning to set people to tasks. She gave the impression that she was not cold at all, which made everyone around her less cold. They lasted 3 hours in that village. In that time, Davos took stock of what they had. 24 soldiers without shields worth the name, 5 horses, 1 donkey, 20-odd women and children who would keep breathing if given a chance, 2 men with smith's hands, 1 with a bow that had lost its tension, 3 dogs that had followed them and decided life was not yet done with bones and so kept their distance, for jars of honey, a handful of bread salted by tears, and 1 queen on a dragon who did not come down. In that time, too, Sandor Clegane and the girl whose name Davos did not know walked the perimeter of the village twice and came back with snow on their shoulders and a silence of a precise kind. "They're coming," the hound said, but he did not say it loudly because he did not have to. You could feel it, the way you felt winter through the soles of your boots when stone stopped keeping secrets. Not a horde, fast ones, scouts. "Then we go," Davos said. He felt a stab of weariness so pure it almost made him laugh. He could not afford the luxury. They went. They left the cabbages and took the blankets, left a coin on each threshold like fools, and took the children in the middle of the column and set 3 men around them who could still throw a spear straight. In the first 100 steps, a sound like a broom dragged over stone came out of the north, and Davos knew the dead were in the village now, touching the places where men had warmed their hands an hour before, learning. He did not look back. Far to the south, where a river ran slow as gossip through flat plains, a raven bounced on the windowsill of a tower in the Red Keep and pecked glass until Qyburn, who did not like to be interrupted in the careful unloveliness of his work, lifted the latch. The bird came in like a piece of the night cut loose. It shook itself. Snow flew in fine sparks across the floor. He took the ribbon tied to its leg with fingers that were clean and always would be no matter what he did with them. The seal was broken by cold or by desperation. It did not matter which. He read as he walked the length of the room, lips moving because he liked the feel of words, and by the time he reached the window again he had arranged everything he had read into his own language, which he trusted more. He smiled once, a private flex of mouth meant for no one. "My queen," he called, and his voice went down corridors where tapestries trapped drafts and servants darted with their heads bowed against certainty. He found her where she had been in the mornings of late, at the window that looked down over the Blackwater and the rows of ships like blind fish at rest. The light made pale gold out of her hair, and when she turned her face had nothing of light in it at all. It was a lovely face still, if you had a taste for dangerous things. "Your bird," she said, and held out a hand. The hand was steady. Qyburn folded the message into her fingers like a secret. She read. When she was done, she folded the paper again and held it. The paper softened with the warmth she could not afford. "So," she said, "so, the North is lost." "Yes, Your Grace," Qyburn said. He had no reason to soften anything for her. She preferred the knife to be sharp when it met skin. "The dead have taken Winterfell in fact, if not in law." "No law binds the dead," she said idly, and then more sharply, "How far south?" "The ravens say the living run, Your Grace. The dead march. The Queen of Dragons remains in the air for the moment." He always hesitated before giving other queens their titles. "The wolf girl with the hair like a frost is among the survivors. The bastard prince who is not a bastard remains." "Spare me the poetry, Qyburn," she said. "Where are they?" He nodded, as if memory were a room he could walk into and take what he needed from the shelf. 3 days from Moat Cailin if they do not stop to die along the way. Farther still to the neck, if the ice thaws not. But they are coming, both armies. One to take and one to plead. He flicked his eyes toward the harbor. The sea remains ours, if we keep it. She looked out at the ships as if they were chessmen. Euron's banner moved like a curse in the breeze. The Golden Company? Camped in fields that used to belong to a petty lord who lived well off wheat and now lives nowhere at all, Qyburn said. A eunuch commander worthy of your coin. Her mouth made a shape at that, contempt and admiration's bastard. And wildfire? He had a clerk come at once with inventories. He remembered them, but she liked numbers spoken by frightened men. Sufficient, he said, when the clerk had stammered out his list. Enough to cook a city or freeze a river with heat. It is a democratic substance. It kills indiscriminately as all honest forces do. Do not preen, she said. Leave me. He bowed and left her alone with the river and the ships and the slow knowledge that all her enemies would arrive at her door whether she invited them or no. When his steps had faded, she let the paper fall. It landed near her foot with a small sigh. She set her heel upon it and twisted, as if killing an insect. She stood a long time, still as a statue carved to warn, then turned not to the gods but to logistics. In her mind, she set fire to the fields north of the city. She put barrels along the hook and in the tunnels under Flea Bottom. She summoned the city's masons and checked if they remembered the plans for gates to be sealed with iron in a night. She imagined the dead at the gates and found the thought did not unseat her. She had lived with dread a long time. It had a room in her palace. She had not expected her enemies to be silent and indifferent. That pricked something like vanity. The living at her door would be harder. When Qyburn came to her again that afternoon, with the pale light making a long, bruised smear across the floor, he carried a hand wrapped in oilcloth. The cloth twitched. "For your study," he said when she did not ask. She raised an eyebrow, not with distaste but curiosity. "Another of your trophies from your friends in black leather? A gift from the north, your grace," he said. "A hand that will not learn the manners of death. Observe." He dropped the bundle on the table and unwrapped it. The hand was gray, the nails black as obsidian, clawed at air without purpose. It made no sound. He put iron tongs to the wrist and pressed it to the table. It dug grooves in oak in answer. "Burn it," she said. At once, he agreed and did. He had a brazier always ready. He placed the hand into the bed of coals and watched. It writhed without noise and then grew still. When he lifted it out, the thing was brittle, and a touch reduced it to flakes as thin as old parchment. "Dragonglass kills them," he said, as if making a report about grain weights. "Valyrian steel, your wildfire, 3 truths we can trust for now." "Trust nothing," she said, because that was the truth she had paid most dearly for. In White Harbor they called the snow fish scales when it fell fat and slow, and the flakes that morning lay thick on the gray stones in a way that made a priest at the Temple of the Seven mumble that the mother had laid her cloak there by mistake. The Manderleys had hung lamps in the halls, but light had a hard time gathering itself. In the harbor, ice formed and reformed along the ropes like necklaces being woven and broken by a careless hand. Yara Greyjoy had a ship there, its prow a snarling beast head that did not mind the cold, and she stood on the deck with a scarf wrapped twice around her throat and her hair braided so it did not freeze to her cheeks. She had a raven's letter clenched in one hand, as if she would either crush it or make it bleed. When she saw the refugees at last, a column shabby with survival, she spat into the water and said to no one, "It's true then, he lost." She did not say who he was. She had known many men who could not keep what they had been given. She took them aboard until the ship groaned and men shouted that if they must drown, at least drown without women and children to shame them. She struck one in the mouth and he took it because she was captain and also because a piece of Theon's ghost could still throw a punch. She did not advertise that. She had learned that pity came unasked and always at the wrong time. Sansa came onto the deck with her chin level and looked at the iron-born woman as if she had expected her. They nodded in the way of commanders who do not waste words on salutations. "Dragonstone," Sansa said, not as an order, not as a plea. Yara jerked her head. She knew already. Ravens, messages, the old lines of loyalties. A ship is a letter you write to the world with your whole body. Storms, Yara said. And Euron. She had made that name a curse, and it sat well as one. We'll skirt the coast where we can, keep to shallows if the wind allows. If the dead have sense, they'll freeze the bay. I've never fought a sea that wanted to be land. Sansa wrapped her cloak closer and went to the rail. On the dock, Davos was settling a woman and her child into a boat bound for another ship. Brienne stood 2 steps away, sword on her back with a rope binding it fast in case she fell overboard and had to swim heavy. Tyrion huddled under an awning, quill in hand, writing and then stopping, and then writing again, as if language might behave if he showed it enough contempt. A small hand caught Sansa's sleeve. She looked down. It was the girl from the road, the one who moved like a dancer with a grudge. She did not ask permission to stand there. Sansa did not tell her to go below. They had been children once, both of them. They stood together for a moment with nothing said and a great deal acknowledged. "You're hurt," Sansa said finally, because there was blood dark under the bandage on the girl's hand. "It will mend," the girl said. "If it doesn't, it will go. Either way." "Don't let it go," Sansa said. "We need every hand that knows. The hand it is." The girl gave a swift, surprised look and then a slow nod, as if she had been complimented by a sword. The ships pulled away when the tide demanded they move. White Harbor shrank into a smudge with a knife of a tower in it. Gulls followed for a while, then wheeled off when the ships failed to throw fish in mercy. The sea took hold of them with a long lift and fall. Ice formed on rails and was knocked off and formed again and would win eventually if the sun did not wake. It did not. Yara swore under her breath with each gust, as if the wind was an enemy you could insult into tripping. The men worked with that silent sailors have that is not reverence but an agreement. If they kept secrets, the sea might keep theirs. In the hold, where the air smelled of old salt and new fear, Davos sat with a boy on either side of him. He told them the story about the time he had smuggled onions into a siege and the men had cried when they saw the greens. He made it funny. He had always found this trick, a way to take an old wound and make it a joke with a clean edge, and the boys laughed like boys do when you prove to them the world is ridiculous enough to survive. When he finished the tale, the older of the boys leaned his head on Davos's arm without looking at him and fell asleep. Davos looked over their crowns and caught Sansa's eye where she stood at the ladder. She held his gaze for a long time. 2 commanders again, not a smuggler and a girl. "Lord Davos," she said when she came close enough to speak without raising her voice. "What will she do?" "She has 2 dragons," he answered. "He has 1. She'll take the sky, as the imp says, and try to burn winter out of the air. I've not seen a thing like that since... I've never seen a thing like that." He rubbed his face. "We'll get to Dragonstone if the sea permits, and then we'll ask the world to make sense." "And if it doesn't?" Sansa asked. He looked down at his hands, at the ridges and old scars, the places where his life had been cut into him. "Then we make our own sense," he said. "I've found that takes a particular kind of stubborn. You've got it, so do a few others." He did not look toward the girl sitting under the lantern, stitching her hand closed with a needle heated in a candle flame and thread boiled in wine, teeth clenched, eyes mean with necessity. He did not look to Brienne, who was sanding a patch of rust-off Oathkeeper as if she could clear the night off it grain by grain. He did not look toward Tyrion, who had stopped writing and started drinking, which was not the same as giving up, not for Tyrion. At Dragonstone, the castle grew out of the rock as if the island wanted to become a thing men feared. The sea made a sound like torn cloth against the base of the cliffs. The beach was black as beaten iron. A fire burned on the great carved braziers, but it was a lie. It was cold where the salt air found your bones. In the high hall, where dragons were made dragons by the way their stone looked down, Daenerys stood in front of a map that had outlived a dozen hands that moved tokens on it. She looked smaller than the room wanted her to be. She had not slept. Her hair lay in an unruly twist down her back. Ash streaked it in a way that made her look older and terribly young. Jon Snow stood at the edge of the map like he was at the edge of something else he could not name. His face had the look of a man who had digested an impossible truth and found it did nothing to ease hunger. His eyes were set deep, and when they lifted to meet hers they did so as if they had weight tied to them. "We can't win like this," Tyrion said, covering the flat stone with his palm, as if feeling the cool might set his mind in order. He looked up at Daenerys. "He has an army that doesn't bleed and time that doesn't pass. You have the sky. Use it. Do not put your soldiers in his jaws. Burn a path south." Daenerys did not look at Tyrion. She looked at Jon and then at the map. "He will raise whatever I burn," she said. The words were flat as hammered tin. "We learned that in the north. Fire was a mercy until it wasn't. Dragonglass works close. Valyrian steel. There is not enough of either." "Wildfire," Tyrion said. He tasted the word as if it were bile. "King's Landing is laced with it. I put it there myself in little glass jewels tucked under stones. The city is a bomb and we stand to light the wrong fuse if we are fools." She looked up then. "Speak plain." "Cersei will not yield the city to you," Tyrion said. "She won't yield it to the dead. She will set it alight before she does either. She has the Golden Company and the fleet and a mind like a trap. But she has one mind. She can be convinced of one thing at a time when panic sits her throne." He moved a small wooden horse down the painted road toward a little chip of stone for the city. "If we make common cause." Jon made a sound. It might have been a laugh that had had its humor pulled out. "She sent a man to cut me down in a courtyard once rather than parley. She emptied a church of our enemies with fire. She loves her children," Tyrion said, and the room looked at him in a way that made his mouth twist. "Presently she has one left that lives. It has walls and a river and 1,000 mouths. If we make her see that the dead will eat them one by one unless she stands with us, she will watch them die and call it victory if I fall with them," Daenerys said. She spoke without heat, which was strange for her. "I have known queens like her since I was a child. They sit in their cities imagining the world knows their names." She lifted her head. "We will ask. And when she refuses, we will take her city away from her." "Your Grace," Davos said from the side of the room, where he had not intended to speak. But sometimes speech comes out of a man like breath. "The dead won't besiege the way living do. They'll walk into the streets and fill them. They'll climb the walls with each OT. Hers bones. Wildfire burns them, but it burns us too. If the city goes up while we're in it, there won't be enough words left in the world to give the story an end." Daenerys put her hand on the map and pressed, as if it could be made to give. "If I kill him," she said, very quiet, and now she looked at no one. "Does it stop?" Jon said. "We don't know." She looked at him then until he had to look back. "You told me you came back from death," she said. "That death had fingers and you tore free." "I did not tear free," he said. "Someone pulled me back." "Then we look for a hand in the dark," she said, and a little of her old steel found her mouth again, as if someone had whispered a name that carried weight. She turned to the window, where the sea hammered itself into froth against rock, and her face, in profile, looked like something a coinmaker would be happy to strike. "We will fly north again," she said. "We will harry him until he looks at me. When he looks at me, I will show him what fire is for." She left the hall without waiting for assent, and a little storm walked with her. Tyrion went to the window and put his fingers through his hair, making a mess of it in a way that scratched some itch. "If she kills him," he said to the room at large, "we live. If she doesn't, we die. If she tries and fails, she dies and the rest follows." That was not a counsel. That was a prayer. "Sometimes prayers work," Davos said. "It's only fair. We have all of us done enough in the other direction." Jon stayed, staring at the place where she had stood as if there were heat stored in the air there. Sansa watched him and said nothing, because she had learned the use of silence too well to waste it. Tyrion saw the set of her mouth and shook his head at a thought that had once seemed like a good plan. Brienne shifted her weight and the leather under her plate creaked. Arya, because she was herself and names were useless if you had not earned them. leaned against a column with her eyes half closed, as if sleep could be stolen like apples when a shopkeeper had turned his back. Beyond the black dragon-crowned towers of Dragonstone, out over the low sea where the spindrift flew, Drogon rose, shedding snow with each beat into a halo like a saint's mistake. Rhaegal followed, injured and angry, one wingtip dragging a line of pain through the air. From the north, where a storm like a tent set by an enormous, pitiless hand had made the sky its camp, Viserion's drag of cold came. He cut through the clouds like a spearhead. The world that lay below their flight, villages huddled into themselves, fields that had been green turning into a rough sheet of white cloth, a river wearing a glazed skin across its broad back, looked less real than the dragons did, as if men's business were smoke and the dragons were iron. In King's Landing, the small folk gathered around men who had voices and listened to them lie. They had always known that winter came with stories. They say the ice walks. A woman selling onions that were more green than onion whispered to a man who had come to buy with a handful of copper. They say a wolf girl rides an old monster with half a face. They say a queen grows fire from her shoulders. The man answered without irony. He picked up the softest onion, squeezed it, put it down. He had shaking hands. His wife had coughed all night, and even the coughs were tired now. They say the dead don't tire. They say the queen in the red castle won't open the gates if it comes to that. The woman replied, and they both laughed a dry, salt laugh that had no amusement at all. They counted their coins in silence and went back to their rooms and their work. Above them, under the dome of the September's charred cousin, a septon prayed to gods who had once liked to concern themselves with grain and fertility and forgiveness. The gods, if they still bothered with men, had a new problem to admire. On the Rose Road, Jaime Lannister rode alone more often than with men. His horse had a patch of white at its forehead, which was apt because Jaime had always liked a touch of the dramatic. The hand he had left trembled not with cold but with something like memory. His right sleeve hung empty and made a noise against his thigh when he moved. He thought of Cersei at windows, of her mouth when she decided a truth, of the way she put a hand to her belly the first time with such awe he had been ashamed to be in the room. He thought of Brienne of Tarth looking at him as if he could be better than he had been. The road was full of such thoughts, because there was no one to say them to. He found a band of soldiers from the Riverlands who had seen the dead in the fields and were heading to the city because that was where men went when they were afraid. He shared their fire and their jokes, which were ragged and obscene the way men's are when death has made them shy. At dawn he rode out without waking them because he had not learned how to say goodbye when he did not know what he would do next. Near the crossroads, this one an honest place of ruts and not a symbol, he met a woman coming the other way with 2 children and a mule. She had the look of a person who had never had time to be pretty and was too proud to be plain. She asked him if the city would open a gate for her if she walked all the way to it. He opened his mouth to answer and realized the truth. He did not know. He gave her 3 coins and a bit of bread and wished her better luck than most. As he rode away she said, "Sire," and he turned. She looked at the hand that had killed kings and hunters and innocents and terrible men alike and said, "Sire, if you see a baker named Mara on the road, tell her there's stew if she comes home." He nodded as if such messages still made the world turn. In the Riverlands, at a farm where a pond lay under a sheet of ice so clear you could see fish moving slow as regret, the dead came and then went, and what they left was quiet. A boy of 12 who had hidden between 2 herricks came out after a day and looked around and did not cry because he had spent all his tears. He found a knife and a sack. He took bread that was not yet moldy. He put on his father's coat and his brother's old boots. He started walking south because he had heard there were city walls in that direction and he had never seen a wall keep out a story, but it kept out wind. When he reached the King's Road, he fell in with 2 men from the Vale who told him they would keep him safe if he carried their things. He believed them because believing made it easier to stand. 2 nights later, they were taken by a pack of dogs who had turned wild, and he ran until his lungs felt like paper. He slept in a ditch curled around the knife. In Old Town, the archmesters argued about words, even as ravens with frost on their feathers filled the rafters and left a white fall on manuscripts. One of them said that winter had come before and so would go again, and that men were too eager to mistake themselves for the axis of the world. Another said that the dead had not walked before in the memory of any man who had written a memory worth reading. A third said that his niece lived in King's Landing and asked if anyone else could hear that in the night the wind had begun to pronounce words. In the end, they did what men do when the world makes a new terror. They wrote a letter. A novice with ink-flecked cheeks tied it to a bird that blinked as if sleep had been taken away from it on purpose. The bird hopped to the sill and then into the white. The boy watched it go and whispered, "Fly." And the word made no difference at all. On the waters beyond Dragonstone, Daenerys leaned low over Drogon's neck and felt the strain in him. She loved him in a way she had not loved any man except perhaps her brother when she was too young to know love was not the same as loyalty. The cold bit into the sides of her mouth, so that when she opened it to shout, she did not know what she meant to shout. It hurt. Ahead, the storm lay like a wall. It had a shape. When she had seen it from ground level, she had thought it was an absence. From above, she could see its logic, the spiraling patience of it, an order that was not hers. She grinned, sudden and fierce. The grin was not joy, but a refusal. She folded her knees and Drogon plunged. He cut a black wound into white, and the first of the whites that had learned to clamber at height fell away, turning and turning with the kind of elegance falling things have. Viserion rose out of the storm, and his mouth made a flower of blue. Heat hit cold. The sky quarreled with itself like brothers that had long been enemies. Regal slid sideways in the air, wounded wings shuddering, and Daenerys thought in the way of cold and war. Not him. A shape stood on the back of the dead dragon, and though she wanted to hate it, what she felt was anger's cleaner cousin. Resolve sharpened to a point. She turned Drogon's head. She spoke a word that had ignited cities from wood to ash. Fire rushed out of a god. It met the cold, and the cold made a sound like a crowd taking in breath. It did not yield. On the decks below, men shaded their eyes, and some whispered prayers in tongues that had not been heard in Westeros since ships came from far amber coasts. Jon Snow stood with the wind from the dragon's passage blowing his hair back and thought of a wall he had once defended that had fallen anyway, and of a man with eyes like ice set in a face carved to be beautiful and without pity. He put his hand to his sword hilt and then took it away. The sword did not reach. He looked up at the queen, and not for the first time he asked a question he did not know how to frame. What do you ask of a person you have already asked everything of? The answer for that hour was not in words. Drogon gave ground in the air, which is to say he bent the sky into a shape that let him survive. Viserion's blue met the red, and the red guttered. The blue bit into rock on a headland, and it went glassy where it hit. The sea steamed. Regal's cry came ragged, then strong, then ragged again. The living on the ships watched victory and defeat waggle like a fish on a spear. When Daenerys could not force the air to be fire anymore, she banked, drew the dead dragon after her, and stung at the edges of the storm. She was making him look. She thought of nothing else. She had never been good at thinking of two things at once when she was truly angry. In the Red Keep, Qyburn made a pyramid out of the hands he had collected and knocked it down and built it again. The queen went among her soldiers and her people with a stillness that made them think she was calm. She was not calm. Anger moved through her like a small, fast animal that could not decide where to sleep. She stood on the battlements when the day refused to be day and felt a sting at the corners of her eyes, not because of wind, but because there was a grief in her that had nothing to attach to. She thought of her children. She had loved them. She thought of the map room where, once, her youngest had placed little stones and made a sound of delight at moving them. That memory was an enemy, and she turned her head so it could not see her. At the same hour, in a cell under the castle, a man with a scribe's hand inked a list of names of men he thought would do what was necessary for the realm. He had made lists his whole life. He had set fire to more pieces of paper than he had set fire to his conscience. Varys blew on the ink to dry it and then folded the page. He laid it under a candle to warm the wax and seal it. It struck him that in a world where the dead walked, a man licking a bit of resin to send a letter had a kind of comedy. He did not smile. At the inn at the crossroads, a boy with a hairy mole and a girl whose mother had died of the cough last winter watched two very different men sit at opposite ends of the room. One was tall but slightly beau. As if the strings that held him up had been cut and tied again badly. His face had been beautiful once and still had the look of a coin that had been kissed too often. He drank alone and spoke to no one. The other man was huge and carried a scar that made the girl miss a breath, and then pretend she had choked on her ale. He ate as if he hated food, and his eyes flicked to the fire and away, as if it had wronged him. The innkeeper called them both Sir in the vague, extravagant way innkeepers do when they hope for trouble or payment and suspect they will get only one. Snow fell in the yard and on the old signboard where a woman with hair like rain once poured ale, and the horses stamped and the chickens fussed and something in the thatch gave up and slid, and the evening lay down in its usual place as if the world were not coming to an incredible point. The boy with the mole said to the girl, "You think they'll fight?" And the girl said, "I hope not. I'm out of beef." And then, because they were young, they giggled, short and guilty. On the road outside, 10 men with longbows passed, faces hooded, and a woman walking with a baby who had the hiccups, and a page leading a mule laden with salt fish. The road preserved its indifference. Winter went on. The dead crossed moors and moated manors, fords and orchards that had withstood late frosts and would not withstand this. And in every village there was a story of something that had just almost happened and did not. A girl lay in the straw under a cart and listened to the dead move past, and when they had gone she took a ring from the hand of a corpse to barter for bread and then vomited quietly into the furrow behind the hedge. A man with white hair and fingers nibbled away by frost picked up a baby in the crook of his arm and walking without knowing why he walked, and the baby made a soft sound, and that sound kept him alive for 3 more days until he found a woman who had milk. A knight of the Reach saw men he had trained alongside in youth rise up again with hands that did not tremble, and he set his teeth into his lower lip so hard he scarred himself. Stories like these lay like footprints in the snow, and then the snow filled them. News ran faster than ravens in one way. It warmed itself by repetition. By the time word reached the city that a queen with silver hair had burned a hole through a storm and then been chased south by a dragon with ice for breath, the tale had grown a tail and horns. Men swore they had seen her from the walls when what they had seen was a gull blown sideways by a gust. No matter. When fear has a shape, it is easier to talk to. The city took on a new rhythm. Men building trebuchets that would not matter. Women carrying water that would boil if wildfire ever ran loose. Children making games out of snow that fell 2 days out of 5 and melted into black slime in alleys where bones and brine met. The bells rang for practice, and the sound gave people something honest to hate. On a night when the sea hissed as if conspiring and the moon was a dull coin pressed to a widow's palm, Arya stood on the parapet of Dragonstone and watched the lantern of a boat far below work its way along the edge of the island, aglow like a stubborn heart. She held a new knife in her right hand and opened and closed her fingers around it until her knuckles warmed. Her left hand was stiff and the stitches itched like ants. She did not scratch them. Sandor came and stood beside her without announcing himself. He had learned that she did not like to be surprised and that she would not thank him for his consideration. "You going to jump?" he said after they had stood without speaking long enough for the wind to make their ears ache. He said it so flatly that it had no cruelty, only information. "No," she said. "Too far. The water would cut me in half." "Good," he said. "I hate swimming." He blew out a breath and a little cloud formed and went away. "You going to run off to kill the queen on your own?" "Not yet," she said, and for a moment they were both honest in the same breath. She sheathed the knife and looked sideways at him. "If I did, would you stop me?" "Try," he said. "Fail. Break your arm and carry you back. You'd stab me with your toes. We'd end up at the bottom of a ditch having a nap." She laughed then, and the sound startled them both. Below, in a hall with a fire that could not do more than bully the cold, Jon and Sansa sat with Davos as if around a hearth from long ago. Tyrion had excused himself to his books, which meant to his thoughts. Brienne stood by the door because standing was easier for her now. Sitting made something seize in her back. They were quiet not because there was nothing to say, but because every word felt like it might become a wall if you stacked too many. "When Father used to talk about winter," Sansa said at last, "I thought of fur cloaks and soup. I thought of huddling in warm rooms and waiting for spring. I did not think of this." "Your father died knowing nothing about dragons," Davos said. But he knew about men. That's not nothing. He rubbed the back of his neck. I knew a king once who thought him a fool for that, and the king burned. There's comfort in the ugly fairness of it. Jon's hands lay on his knees. He looked older than the last time the world had had a chance to look at him. When this is done, he said, choosing the words like stones in a riverbed, if any of us are left, none of us will be the people we plan to be. Sansa's smile was a thing of bones. People make plans? He looked at her, and for a moment the old siblings reached for each other through years of winter and court and marriage and death. And then they let their hands fall because the world did not have furniture for such comforts right now. In the morning that did not feel like morning, a boat slid into the black water under the looming jaw of Dragonstone, and a man climbed out with a rope between his teeth. His beard had salt crust in it, and his hands were nicked. He climbed like a man who had spent more time in masts than on floors. He tied the boat and looked up at the wet stone and said softly, "Well then," and started to climb. At the top, Sandor's hand hauled him over the lip like pulling a fish from a barrel and dropped him on the flagstones. "You picked a bad time for a visit," the hound said. "I was told there's no good time," the man replied and spat salt. "Euron's ships raid the coast like gulls on a gutting. The Golden Company is buying grain at prices that make men consider cannibalism more seriously than they ought. The dead walk on land. On the sea the ice blooms. I'd ask a god for a day off, but I've never believed in days off." He looked up and smiled in a way that made you forgive him for existing. "Gendry," he said, offering a hand that was calloused and open. "At your service if you need something hit hard and straight. Storm's ends mended. I can make iron sing." Sandor grunted. "Talk to the lady with the silver head, or the little man, or the bastard who's not one, or the red-headed she-wolf. They're the ones making lists." Gendry nodded as if that had been the plan in his nerve all along and went toward the hall, boots leaving wet prints that filled slowly with new falling white. And so it went, that day and the next and the next, and the dead came on, and the living arranged themselves into patterns that felt like choices. In the city, Cersei stood at a window and did not flinch when a flake of snow, honest round, landed on the sill and did not melt. She set her finger to it, and it turned to water under her heat. She lifted that finger to her mouth and tasted salt. She looked out over the city as if challenging it to deny her, and the city would not. Cities rarely argue back unless they burn. She had sent a letter to the Dragon Queen that had said fine words and meant nothing. She had written another and burned it over a candle and watched it twist like a snake. She had called her captains and told them where to stand when a tide that did not know it was a tide reached them. She had allowed Qyburn to put barrels where they would do the most good and the most damage. She had gone to sleep after dark and woken before dawn, and in the handful of hours between had dreamed of children's laughter and of stairs and of the sound of a harp she had heard when she was a girl. When she woke, she did not cry. She did not cry for anything anymore except rage, and she had enough of that to flood the river. On the wall south of the city, men from the Reach and the Stormlands and the Crownlands stood shoulder to shoulder and looked north and spoke about nothing they remembered by the next day. Their breath rose in white puffs. One dropped his spear. The man beside him picked it up and said nothing and did not hand it back. He simply held it. You could see the line of frost on the road like a line on a map, a small white first, then thicker. "They say the dragons make steam where they breathe," someone murmured. And everyone liked that image because it made the dragons sound like kettles, and kettles meant tea and women who scolded you back to life. A farmer's wife named Mara stood at the back of a crowd in Flea Bottom and handed out stew to whoever had a bowl. And when she ran out, she handed out silence and smiles, and it worked almost as well. Her hands were raw with washing. A boy asked her if she had heard about a man who had gone south with a hand of gold, and she said she had not, but she would look when she went to market, and the boy nodded as if that solved it. 2 hours later, Mara walked the long lane back to the little room she kept off an alley and found her door open and her pan stolen. She smiled then too, because she knew what she would do. She would borrow a pan and she would make stew again the next day. When a world is falling apart, someone has to feed the people falling, and she had arms and a back and a will. On the third day of no proper dawns, when the sea looked like a door shut and the sky like the back of a knife, Ravens from Dragonstone flapped in a flock toward the city, and behind them a smear in the air that ships taught you to recognize. Dragons far off. The ravens came first, and one landed on Qyburn's shoulder as if he were a gargoyle and delivered a message. He read it. He smiled his small, intolerable smile. He took it to the queen and she read it and smiled too, though not the same way. "They propose a parley," she said to no one and everyone. "On the city's edge at the ruined dragon pit of all places. Those old stories keep circling their own tales." She flicked the paper into the fire. "Prepare. I will instruct the scorpions to be set," Qyburn said, and she waved a hand, bored with his zeal. "Sneak whatever knives you like under sleeves," she added, almost as an indulgence. "I will bring words. They brought winter. We will see if words can bite through frost." At Dragonstone, Daenerys sat with a cup of wine she did not drink and looked at a map she had walked her whole life. She had never lived anywhere for long until she had flown over a city and thought, yes, mine. She had been wrong about 100 things and right about a dozen. She had learned. She would learn this too, or she would not. Jon stood not close enough to touch and not far enough to be safe. "She'll kill us," he said, because he had decided that saying unpleasant things was an honest man's penance for the times he had swallowed truth. "She will try," Daenerys said. "She holds a city. I hold a promise men make to themselves when they are dying." She looked up. "If I lose, burn me so he cannot take me. If I win—" She stopped. Her mouth made a shape that wanted to be a smile and was not. "If I win, we will have something to argue about after." "You won't lose," he said, which meant nothing. She listened to the lie as an act of kindness, and it stood between them like warmth for a moment. Sansa watched them and did not know whether to be angry or sad at how much they trusted and did not trust. She thought of the last time she had stood in a place like that, with mad men asking mad things and her body the coin. She stepped in because she was tired of waiting. "We need a plan for when she refuses," she said, "because she will. She has built herself on refusing to admit there is any world beyond the city she holds and her scorn for it." She put her finger on the map where the Rose Road entered the city's fields. "If the dead come while we stand outside the walls arguing about banners, we will have to fight both. Better to make the fight ours before the dead make it theirs. Take the fields, deny the city grain. Use her own weapon against her. Do not burn the city. Do not burn anyone. Let them see the dead at the gates and choose." "That is a slow plan," Tyrion said. He had come back from his books with his mouth wine-stained and his mind honed by the very wine he used to dull it. "The dead are quick. Then we speed them," Sansa said simply. "Ride to the twins, break the bridges, flood what can be flooded, starve what can be starved. We've always been at the mercy of weather. Let us make mercy out of weather." Jon looked at her with something like admiration that had no blood in it for once. "You should have been queen," he said, and she lifted a shoulder. The gesture meant nothing and everything. "We will see who is left to need one," she said. The dragon pit was a round scar on the city's face, full of weeds, an amphitheater where the bones of monsters had once been displayed to make men feel grand. The wind flicked the grass like fingers. Cersei arrived early, because arriving early makes people think you fear nothing. She wore a gown that could be armor if you squinted and a collar that made her neck look honest and beautiful. Her guards were statues that had decided to pretend to be men. Qyburn walked with her like a shadow that read books. Daenerys came late, because she had a habit of teaching men patience by denying them it. She came on foot, though the dragons were nearer than anyone liked. Jon walked with her and Tyrion and Sansa with her hood up, and Brienne stepped back as if to intercept something that could not be intercepted, and Arya in the way of someone who can appear where she wants. Davos, who knew theater when he saw it, shook his head once and then squared his jaw. There were words then, and the words had that hollow, echoing sound words have when they bounce around a space made for other noises. The gist of them was old and simple. Join me or die. Refuse and die. Watch men die and choose when you cannot choose who. Cersei listened. Her mouth made shapes. She said sentences that cut. Tyrion answered with a tired kind of grace. Daenerys did not let anger run away with her language, which was something she had learned and would have been pleased to notice later. Jon said little, and when he did, the syllables were plain bread. In the end, of course, Cersei said no. She refused with beauty. She refused as if the word were a jewel she had hidden in her mouth for years, polishing it with her tongue. She refused because she could not imagine a world that did not center on her refusal. She turned to go. The wind lifted the ends of her hair. She took 2 steps. They heard it then, a noise that was sky and sea and stone. It rolled over the city like a command. The air grew colder so fast that men's breath froze mid-exhalation into glitter. On the northern edge of the horizon, where the land sloped into the plain, a paleness gathered into a line. It was not snow. It was the dead, and the light on them changed not because the sun had moved but because something much worse had. Cersei stopped. Her face did not change, and yet everything in it did. She turned back, slowly. The silence that had held the dragon pit fractured into 100 little sounds. Leather shifting, men's teeth touching, someone crossing themselves who had not done so in 30 years. Daenerys lifted her head like a dog scenting smoke. The shadow of a dragon passed over the grass, and Cersei's eyelids fluttered once. And that small concession to reflex was the closest she had come to fear in weeks. "Very well," she said, each word its own coin stamped and spent. "We fight the dead." She said it as if she were naming a child doomed to die. She turned to Qyburn. "Ready everything," she said. "If it burns, set it. If it flies, chain it. If it breathes, make it bleed. If a man runs, shoot him. If a woman screams, shut the door. If a child cries, carry him." No one could tell whether she lied, not even herself. On the walls, scorpions were hauled into place, their cords creaking. In the streets, women pulled children along by their wrists, and men put their hands on wagons and pushed until their palms bled. In Dragonstone's hall, a stack of letters waited for ravens that might never fly again. In a bog in the neck, a man with reeds woven into his hair watched the ice bloom and whispered a name he had kept for years. In White Harbor, a ship broke loose of its mooring and went down like a man shot through the heart. In the Vale, a falcon turned once and then flew south because something in the earth told it to. The dead came with a sound like silk tearing when silk has been frozen. The front ranks moved clean as a knife. Behind them walked men and women who had been the day before. Among them, from time to time, something taller and colder would pace, and wherever it set its eyes, frost grew on blades. Far above, a dark shape flexed a ruined wing and bellowed a note that unstitched courage. Answering him, dragons drew circles in the air like signatures, and the cold that had held the sky tried to write its name on them. This is how the march on the city began. With words dragged out of reluctant mouths, and with the snow falling in confused, tender patterns as if unwilling to admit what it would hide, with a queen who hated to share anything agreeing to share the last thing, with a smuggler counting people with his thumbs, with a sister and a brother separated by miles looking toward the same piece of wall and not knowing it, with a girl tasting the wind to learn if it meant knives. It began as all terrible things begin, halfway through stories that were not finished and would not be.